I invite Geeta madam for today, a learning curve. We have CK Session sir for chairing the session. Also, we have the state leaders here. I welcome all of you to the meeting. Session sir, I invite you for the chairman's address.
Thank you, Nihas. First of all, I thank you for letting me in, because as so many of us keeping outside because the non-availability of space. I think this is a rare opportunity to introduce what are the things in pediatrics. And so far we were learning, we were practicing, we were teaching inborn errors of metabolism. That was really a tough subject for all of us. And we have seen the pediatricians who are practicing this branch, transforming them to real scientists. Now, because the genomics and all the facilities available, another branch of clinical medicine is immunology. Very wide, a lot of things are there. And Geeta has specifically picked up an inborn error to deal with. And it is, in fact, a very promising branch of medicine. And she has been at it for several years. And we expect so many things from her. And gentlemen, I present you Dr. Geeta Govindaraj, Professor of Pediatrics.
Thank you so much, Professor C.K. Shashidharan, for those very kind words. Actually, I would like to dedicate this talk this evening to all my teachers, Professor C.K. Shashidharan, Professor Riaz, Dr. Sri Kumaran, and all other respected teachers who have shown me the way over the years. Let's go to the topic proper. We all know that when children join school, they come back home repeatedly with upper respiratory infections. So we are all used to the sniffles of little children. But why do some children spend much of their lives in hospital, in and out with various infections? Why do some families lose children repeatedly to various infections? There are absolutely no explanations that we could have before we started off on our journey, although there was a lot of published data on it. So we need to be aware that there is a changing spectrum of pediatric disease. In our own lifetime, we have seen paralytic polio being swept under the carpet with a program by the WHO and other agencies. We hardly see pyogenic meningitis with the thick pus we used to. We hardly do ventricular taps in the side rooms nowadays. It's so difficult to see a child with rheumatic fever, or for that matter, rheumatic heart disease. We no longer see the entities of necrotizing enteritis and kwashiorkor very, very rarely. But what do we see? Well, we see more and more autoimmune conditions, autoimmune encephalitis, autoimmune thyroiditis, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, type 1 diabetes, juvenile idiopathic arthritis, HLH, and the like. So over the last few years, there has been a shift in our focus. And a lot of us, it's a big team that has been working on this. And our focus has been on immunocompromised children after we have been working with children with HIV/AIDS. So there has been this huge revolution in care of children with HIV/AIDS. There is no longer mother-to-child transmission. Antiretrovirals are working fantastically. So we shifted our attention to children with an inherited reason for an immunocompromised system. Now, these children have unusual infections, autoimmunity, and autoinflammation. And it has been the start of a new and complex chapter. Let's start about 5 years ago. We were doing ward rounds. Actually, it was in Ward 54. Professor Riaz was the head of the department then. So we had 2 children, both boys over a year old, with recurrent infections. The second child's mother disclosed that they were both cousins. We decided to look closely, and from then on, it's been a journey that has been well worth it. And we have been learning to recognize patterns. Actually, pattern recognition is one of the important strategies that we use. Well, over the last 5 years, Government Medical College Kozhikode has been involved in collaborative work with the CSIR Institute for Genomics and Integrative Biology at Delhi. So we have our senior scientist who actually did his MBBS right here in Government Medical College Kozhikode. Dr. Vinod Skaria has been spearheading this program with Dr. Sridhar Shivasubbu. And we also have Abhinav Jain, a graduate student from IGIB, who is spending all his time working on children with primary deficiency disorders. And apart from the Department of Pediatrics, we also have a lot of involvement from the departments of pathology, departments of microbiology and anatomy. And we acknowledge funding from the Institute of the Science and Engineering Research Board, Delhi, and the Foundation for Primary Immune Deficiency Disorders, USA. So in the next few minutes, we'll be talking about the background and the relevance of inborn errors of immunity, how we make a diagnosis, what is the role of the pediatrician, what are the benefits to the family, and what are the advantages to the community. Well, we started with lots and lots of challenges. There were no estimates of primary immune deficiency disorders, which is the older name for inborn errors of immunity, in this part of the country. And we have high rates of consanguinity, which makes it highly probable that we would see a lot of children with these disorders. Added to that, there was a lack of awareness among healthcare providers. Our own NIVET, we had no experience in the field. The poor availability of immunological and molecular genetic testing, and vast distances to be covered to access tests in premier centers. So we started off with a large number of challenges, but we saw them as possible opportunities too. Now, what are these spur infections? Well, they are infections that are severe, that are persistent, that are unusual, that is unusual severity, unusual frequency, unusual organism, and also infections that are recurrent. So when we see recurrent infections, the first question we ask ourselves is there increased exposure to pathogens? So as when a child goes to school, so this is the usual thing that happens, but they are usually viral upper respiratory and innocuous infections. Now, the next question we ask, is there an anatomical abnormality? For example, is there an eventration of the diaphragm? Is there a diaphragmatic hernia? Is there a tracheoesophageal fistula? When you have recurrent or persistent infections. So if the answers to these two questions is no, the next question we ask is, possibly have an immunocompromised state, either acquired or congenital. So we need to have an early start, and we need to factor in rare diseases in our day-to-day practice. A flare unusual is highly desirable, and it is essential to spend time taking a detailed family history. And it's not just infections. We already said we need to factor in autoimmunity, autoinflammation. And if we have a child having failure to thrive, it's not just inborn errors of metabolism. It could well be an inherited susceptibility to infectious disease. And early diagnosis is critical. So look at this chart that you see on the right side of the screen. If a child has 4 or more ear infections in a year, frequent fever, recurrent fungal infections, recurrent abscesses, especially organ abscesses, recurrent antibiotics, use of recurrent antibiotics, infections with normally harmless pathogens, a family history of immunodeficiency, chronic diarrhea, recurrent deep-seated infections like meningitis or septicemia, early onset autoimmunity, and we already talked of failure to thrive and persistent fungal infection. Ask ourselves, is this child possibly having a primary immune deficiency disorder? But before we think of primary immune deficiency, we need to weed out secondary causes of an immunocompromised state, like nephrotic syndrome, malignancies. Ask ourselves, is the child on immunosuppressive drugs like steroids? Is the child having diabetes or HIV infection? But by far, the most common cause of an immunocompromised state is severe malnutrition. And all of us pediatricians are well aware of this. On the right, you can see a child with multiple liver abscesses. Is it clear? This child had multiple liver abscesses due to HIV infection. It was a migrant laborer's child who was found actually on the railway station and brought to us. And he only knew Telugu. So we had to find an undergraduate student who could communicate with this child. And finally found out that he was suffering from HIV infection. Now, how do the types of infection serve as clues? Or is it possible to get a clue from the type of infection? Well, if you have predominantly bacterial infections, especially due to encapsulated organisms and staph aureus, it is more likely to be a B cell defect. If you have a child with the whole spectrum of infections, the total spectrum, viral, bacterial, fungal, and opportunistic infections, well, it could be a T cell defect. Whereas if we have children mainly coming to us with catalase positive organisms or deep-seated fungal infections like aspergillus, think of a phagocytic defect. And when we talk of MSMD, that is Mendelian susceptibility to mycobacterial disease, it encompasses not only susceptibility to mycobacterial disease, but also to other intracellular organisms like Salmonella and Candida. And there are certain signature pathogens. Their very presence makes you think that there could be a particular disease that is involved. So if you have infections due to Aspergillus, Aspergillus is a signature pathogen for chronic granulomatous disease. So also, if you have Chromobacterium violaceium, we need to take a look deeply and see whether we could rule out chronic granulomatous disease before we do anything else. What about the onset of infections? Well, neonatal onset is more suggestive of a phagocytic or a T cell or a combined immune deficiency. Whereas, if we have a child with a pure B cell defect, they are more likely to present after the first half of infancy. Why? Because they are protected until that time by maternally derived immunoglobulins. If you have a late onset, it is more commonly a common variable immune deficiency. But we need to remember that a primary immune deficiency disorder can have its onset at any time during our lifespan. Now, what are the clinical clues we look for? Well, if you have a child with facial dysmorphism, there are a limited number of differential diagnoses. You can think of the hyper IgE syndrome, the DiGeorge syndrome, and a few others. If a child has absent tonsils or atrophic tonsils during the period between 4 and 8 years, when you expect lymph node hyperplasia, lymphoid hyperplasia, then think of X-linked A-gamma globulinemia, especially in a male child. As also, if the lymph nodes are not palpable, which we usually expect them to be. What about a child lesions? So depending on the type of skin lesion, you can hazard a guess. So if you have a child with recurrent atopic dermatitis, intractable atopic dermatitis, well, if the child also has thrombocytopenia, bleeding manifestations, we would think of Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome. If you have a child with other, like if you have a child with IPEX syndrome, you would find oozing, weepy lesions. So the type of skin lesions would give us a clue. If you have children with bleeding manifestations, well, we think of Shediac-Higashi syndrome, Griscelli syndrome, and a few other syndromes. Depigmentation of the skin, hair, and eyes give us clues as well. Gingivitis or oral ulcers, especially in hyper IgM syndrome and leukocyte adhesion deficiency. Generalized lymphadenopathy, again, you have the various lymphoproliferative syndromes like ALPS. Hepatosplenomegaly is not very common in children with primary immune deficiency disorders, except in a few like CGD. And then we have certain well-recognized syndromes that also give us a clue. Now look at this case. We had a 6-year-old girl born to third-degree consanguineous parents who was symptomatic right from the newborn period. He had recurrent respiratory infections, 3 admissions for pneumonia, pyogenic meningitis once, malignant external otitis with perichondritis. It was a girl child, sorry. She had recurrent oral thrush as well. So not only bacterial, but fungal infections too. She had umbilical sepsis and cellulitis. She had anemia. Look at her total count. So you have a total count of 40,000 with polymorphonuclear leukocytosis and a normal platelet count, a normal immunoglobulin profile as well. So what would you think of? Well, look at the clinical pictures that we have. She had a hypertrophic scar on her abdominal wall. She had gingivitis, and look at her ear. You can see a cauliflower ear with stenosis of the external auditory canal because of the severe perichondritis that she had suffered. And we did flow cytometric assay and found absent expression of CD18 and CD11A. And we went on further to send samples to IGIB Delhi for exome sequencing for this child. And what could we have possibly found? Well, a variant in the ITGB2 gene, and the diagnosis was confirmed as a phagocytic defect where you have a large number of neutrophils with poor function. And actually it is the rolling of these neutrophils that is defective, and it is leukocyte adhesion deficiency type 1. And we went back to the history and found out that this child actually had a delayed fall of the umbilical stump, which is a very important clue. And later this child's mother came to us a year ago saying that she's pregnant once again. And we were able to find, we were able to do offer antenatal diagnosis and find that the child was a carrier and therefore would be unaffected. Now look at the second case. This is a 6-month-old male baby born to non-consanguineous parents who had recurrent bouts intractable bouts of cough for the last 3 weeks. So intractable bouts of cough in a 6-month-old baby boy who had a history of pneumonia at 4 months of age. He was partially immunized and had mild developmental delay. There had been a remarkable family history in the sense that there were 5 male child deaths in 2 generations, and the father had albinism. On examination, the child had mild splenomegaly and did not have a severe acute malnutrition. The grandmother was asking us, is this a curse, doctor? Is something wrong with the family? What's going to happen to this child? We have already lost 5 male children. So this was the pedigree chart. You can see that the child's mother had lost 4 male siblings, and she also had 2 miscarriages. And this child had also lost 1 male sibling. So the family had lost 5 male children in total, and they were really at their wits' end as what to do. So on investigations of this child, the hemoglobin was 8.3. The total count was very high at 35,000. There was a lymphocytic pleocytosis, eosinophilia, and normal ESR. The immunoglobulin profile didn't, you can see that the IgA was low. The IgG was low as well, but the IgM was normal. The lymphocyte subset analysis was not very helpful. We had normal CD4, CD8 count, CD19 count was also normal. He had microcytic hypochromic anemia with a reactive lymphocytosis, absent CD154 expression, and again, exome sequencing at IGAB. They were able to find a variant in the CD40 ligand gene. So what was the diagnosis? Low IgA, low IgG, a normal IgM. Could it be X-linked amyoglobulinemia? But the CD19 was normal and the variant was in the CD40 ligand gene. So well, in fact, it is the X-linked hyper-IgM syndrome. And we need to emphasize that in hyper-IgM syndrome, as the name implies, you need not have very high IgM levels. The IgM levels may be normal or elevated. But this child had something else. This child had come to us with whooping cough. So this child had lymphocytic pleocytosis, intractable cough for 3 weeks, a normal ESR. So this was the immediate problem that we had to sort out. And then we started the child on monthly immunoglobulin, and the child is doing very well and the family is really happy. But curative treatment is a hematopoietic stem cell transplant. Look at the third case. This child, an adolescent at 17 years, was brought to us with hemoptysis of 1 week's duration. He had had a very sad childhood. He had been in and out of hospital about 20 times. He had had recurrent respiratory infections and diarrhea from early infancy. He had septic arthritis at 6 years with Staph aureus, empyema, for which decortication was required at 10 years, pneumococcal meningitis at 12 years, sepsis with MODS and hemopericardium at 15 years. Pseudomonas had been isolated in culture repeatedly. So what was he really having? He was having stunting and delayed puberty. So although the mother and grandmother said that they had been in and out of hospital so many times, several admissions in the PICU in North Kerala and Karnataka, they had run dry, all their resources had run dry, they were in debt. But in spite of all this, the main worry for the child who was 17 was, am I going to get a mustache like my other friends? So this was his main problem. So you can see on the right, one of the x-rays with empyema, showing empyema, and we can see In the HRCT, he had bilateral cystic bronchiectasis. Look at his immunoglobulins. All of them were low. He had pan-hypogammaglobulinemia. His lymphocyte subset analysis was revealing. Although all other subsets were normal, his B lymphocytes, CD19, was absent. And again, we looked at the whole exome sequencing data at IGIB and found that he had a non-synonymous variant in exon 10 of the BTK gene. So this was a late diagnosis of X-linked agammaglobulinemia. Actually, his immunoglobulin profile had been done once more at around 15 years of age, but it was borderline. And unfortunately, that particular hospital, it was not possible to do a flow cytometry. And because of Pseudomonas, isolated repeatedly, he was being managed as cystic fibrosis. Now, how important is it to look out for lymphopenia? Now, our junior residents are very adept now. They not only look at the absolute neutrophil count, but also very carefully look for lymphopenia. And why do we need to look for lymphopenia in young infants? Well, it is, especially if you look at serial CBCs, it is one of the very important markers for severe combined immune deficiency, which, if not diagnosed right in time, is usually fatal by the first year of life. And how do these children present? Well, they come to us with recurrent pneumonia, diarrhea, BCG adenitis, acute suppurative otitis media. CMV infection is very, very common in these children. So they have combined T and B cell defect. And failure to thrive is a hallmark of T cell immune deficiency because you have usually chronic infections in T cell defects, including opportunistic infections. And if you make a quick diagnosis, we can send these children quickly if they have. We get time to look for a matched donor and can send them for an HSCT. And in a lot of countries, in all states in the US, several European countries, and a few other countries, they are doing routine newborn screening by the T cell receptor excision circles and the copper deleting receptor excision circles. And they are able to make a diagnosis within the first few days of life and send these children up for an HSCT, which is curative. In the West, they are also looking at gene therapy, especially for ADA skin. And look at the right side of your screen. You can see a lateral chest X-ray, which is the ideal view to look for a thymus. And you can find that an absent thymus in a child with severe combined immune deficiency, apart from because of the T cell defect. And this is the pedigree chart of a child who was diagnosed with SCID. You can see that it's a consanguineous parentage. The child had already lost one male sibling. And this child was in our PICU. Dr. Jayakrishnan asked us to have a look. And we were able to find that this child had CMV infection, lymphopenia, and very low T and B cell counts on flow cytometry. And we could make a diagnosis of a RAG1 SCID, again with whole exome sequencing from IGIB Delhi. Now, we have seen unusually severe, persistent, and frequent infections. Now, what about unusual infections? Are they really unusual? Do we often come across them? Well, you can see an erythematous papular lesion on the arm of one of our patients who was a 6-year-old girl of consanguineous parentage. She had had recurrent oral and genital ulcers, apart from intractable gingivitis, apart from 2 episodes of pneumonia as well. So that is one of our warning signs. Any child with 2 episodes of pneumonia, especially within 12 months, has to be screened for a primary immune deficiency disorder. This child also had hepatomegaly. She was worked up for Behçet's disease, Crohn's disease, but nothing could be found. But then her immunoglobulin profile and lymphocyte subsets were done next. That didn't show us anything. We were nowhere still. But the next investigation, the dihydrorhodamine assay, which you can see on the right side of the screen, was actually helped us to make a diagnosis. You can see the DHR in a normal child. On stimulation, you can see the shift in the curve, whereas in a child with CGD, you can see even after stimulation, the oxidative burst fails to occur and there is no shift of the graph. And you can see in the lower part of the screen on the left, on the right, the nitroblue tetrazolium test, which is usually done by Atulya in the MRU. Before stimulation and after stimulation, the neutrophils have failed to show the oxidative burst. And this child had a variant in the NCF1 gene, and the diagnosis was confirmed as chronic granulomatous disease, autosomal recessive. And the organism was found, the Department of Microbiology was able to isolate Poecilomyces. So we have Dr. Kalpana, Dr. Anita, and others from the Department of Microbiology who are always there to help us. And Poecilomyces is a fungus which is very difficult to eradicate because it is resistant to multiple drugs and usually does not cause infections in an immunocompetent host. Now look at the next slide. This was a child, an infant brought to us with recurrent pneumonia in our ward. And the Department of Microbiology told us that this child had Elizabeth Kingia species. And it's very unusual to find a child having pneumonia due to this unusual organism. So we went, this child also had certain other characteristics like lymphopenia and hypocalcemia. So we thought, okay, is this child having DiGeorge syndrome? We went on to do a fluorescent in situ hybridization, but we did not find the characteristic microdeletion. Instead, they said there is likely to be a translocation, and the karyotyping was done in the Department of Anatomy by Dr. Asha, Manju, and others, and they were able to find 422 and 1114 translocation. So this was an unusual case of DiGeorge syndrome with 2 translocations. So unusual diagnosis usually have an unusual host. Now, over the years, we have been looking more and more carefully for children with inherited susceptibility to infectious disease. But we have been, over the last few years, finding more and more children with a problem with autoinflammation. And these autoinflammatory diseases, among them, the most common one we have been able to pick up is the hyper IgD syndrome. Among the cohort which we have about 13 children. Less than 50% of them had recurrent abdominal pain, vomiting, and flares on vaccination. About 50 to 75% had arthritis, recurrent aphthous ulcers with fever, and recurrent infections as well, along with the febrile episodes. But the majority of them had recurrent febrile episodes lasting about 4 to 7 days, at an interval about 7 to 10 days, associated with rash, recurrent diarrhea, lymphadenitis, and hepatosplenomegaly. And we and scientists at IGIB Delhi were able to find the hyper IgD syndrome, the variant for that, in the mevalonate kinase gene in these children. Now look carefully at the diagram on the right. So these are what we look for. We've already gone through them. And these children, they often come to us with flares on vaccination. If you have a child with recurrent febrile episodes, upper respiratory infection, recurrent pneumonia, Okay. I'm very sorry about that. I do not know what happened. So was I audible on the previous slide? Was I audible on the previous slide?
No.
No,
No.
you are not audible, madam.
Okay. So I'll go to the previous slide. I'm so sorry about this. What happened? Not going to the previous slide.
No.
This slide was audible. So was I audible on this slide?
Yes, from this I think.
Okay.
From here,
So-
you were not audible, ma'am.
Audible, Geeta, audible.
Yeah, I'm sorry about this. I don't know what happened. So over the years, while we have been looking very carefully for children with inherited susceptibility to infections. We have been finding a subgroup of children who have recurrent febrile episodes associated with diarrhea, abdominal pain, rash, oral ulcers, lymphadenitis, flares on vaccination, as well as arthralgia, myalgia. And we have been able to to put together a cohort of about 13 children, which is the largest cohort in the country, having the hyper IgD syndrome, which is the most common of the autoinflammatory syndromes we have been seeing. And what do the children have? Well, the majority of them have rash, recurrent diarrhea, lymphadenitis, and hepatosplenomegaly. A smaller number have arthritis, aphthous ulcers, and recurrent infections, and less than 50% had recurrent abdominal pain, vomiting, and flares on vaccination, which we would call AEFI. So these children would have severe pain and prolonged fever following vaccination. Now, our HIDS cohort, hyper IgD syndrome, includes 13 children, and the scientists at IGIB have been able to detect variants in the MVK gene, the mevalonate kinase gene. The majority of the children were double heterozygotes for variants in the MVK gene, and 2 siblings were homozygous for these variants. And it has been found that compared to European studies, ulcers, myalgia, and splenomegaly were much higher in our cohort. And these children over the years had been diagnosed as autoimmune lymphoproliferative syndrome, lymphoma, systemic onset JIA, Castleman disease, which is a lymphoproliferative syndrome, and histiocytosis. So if you see these children, they bring their books. They have been diagnosed repeatedly with various other conditions, but we are not to blame because these investigations that we now have were not available to us previously. And our cohort also has elevated IgA and IgE levels apart from IgD levels. It is very difficult to do the total IgD. We are able only to do the IgD surface in these children. They also have characteristically acute phase reactions elevated during flares, high CRP, high ESR, and various other acute phase reactants as well. And these were the commonest variants. There was the Dutch variant, which is the V377I variant, and a splicing variant, which was peculiar to the Indian population. Whereas the Dutch mutation, the V377I variant, is especially seen in the Dutch population and therefore called the Dutch mutation. Now, what are the clinical clues to diagnosis? How do we decide which category of primary immunodeficiency disorder we are dealing with? So if you have a male child with absent tonsils, non-palpable cervical lymph nodes, onset beyond 6 months of age, especially having sinopulmonary infections, sometimes autoimmunity, well, we would vote for a B cell defect. If you have a child with failure to thrive, recurrent diarrhea, especially chronic fungal infections, persistent thrush, opportunistic infections, think of a T cell or a combined immune deficiency disorder, like SCID. If there is recurrent abscesses, especially deep abscesses, suppurative lymphadenitis, persistent omphalitis, oral ulcers, osteomyelitis, pneumonia. Think of a phagocytic defect like a quantitative defect, which could be congenital neutropenia, or a functional defect like CGD. Complement deficiency, if you have recurrent meningococcal meningitis, angioedema, atypical HUS, SLE, PNH, the onto-inflammatory syndromes we have just talked about. And if you have a characteristic facies, congenital heart disease, skeletal or skin manifestations, which are self-explanatory, then think of a syndromic type. So over the years, we have several children now on pooled immunoglobulin, IVIG, given every 3 to 4 weeks. That really changes their life, and it improves their quality of life to such a degree that it is unimaginable, not only for the child, but for the family as well. We need to determine the trough levels at which each particular patient is asymptomatic. We usually start with 400 milligrams per kilogram. We should give it very slowly over 4 hours. And these are the indications: XLA, hyper IgM, SCID, Viscot Aldrich. And it's given free of cost under the government schemes in our state. Kerala is one of the few states in the country which is giving IVIG free of cost. Genetic counseling. So we have all these children suffering from primary immune deficiency disorders. So many affected families, so many variants. What do we do with this data that we have? So it's so important to make use of the data we have for the families. A family losing a child, that experience has to help them in the next pregnancy. Otherwise, what is it worth? So while we have been trying to offer prenatal and antenatal diagnosis by chorionic venous sampling, amniocentesis, right here in the Department of Obstetrics, Dr. Beena has especially taken a lead role. But we need to identify the variant first. Otherwise, we can't go forward. We have had all help from CSIR IGIB, who actually sends they are able to send the variant, the details of the variant to CCMB Hyderabad, and they are able to do the rest of the work over there. So it's actually a pan-India initiative. And we get all help from Dr. Mohandas and Dr. Girish at the genetic clinic, apart from the OBG department. And on the right side of the screen, this is a family who lost their first child, CGD. It was X-linked CGD, and the mother came to us again. So we need to follow them up. We need to keep talking to them. So it's difficult in the immediate period after a child has died or after a diagnosis has just been made. We need to give them time. But you need to, they should believe in you, believe in the team. Otherwise, they're not going to come back to us. So this child now has a normal child who does not have CGD. Another child with an inline variant who was not fortunate to survive. And at the bottom of the screen, the data of a child with a leukocyte addition deficiency. You saw the pictures, the child with the cauliflower ear. So the mother came to us and said, you must do something. I'm actually pregnant now. And so we need to intervene depending on what test you're going to do. CVS at around 11 to 12 weeks, amniocentesis a little later, around 16 weeks. So it's all a team effort. But actually, the joy we get out of it cannot be described. And what about COVID-19 and the immune response? Well, all this pandemic has been responsible for this epidemic of webinars, and we are all enjoying it. So it's so nice that the IAP has stepped in and done that. And look at this study. It's come out of one of the provinces which has been the worst affected. There was an outbreak of severe Kawasaki-like disease at the epicenter of the epidemic. There have been reports from the US and UK and other countries as well. This was a report from the Lancet. So they have found older children coming down with Kawasaki-like disease, higher rates of cardiac involvement, Kawasaki shock syndrome and macrophage activation syndrome were actually more in this cohort of children. And a similar outbreak is expected in countries with an ongoing SARS-CoV-2 epidemic. So Dr. Geeta and Dr. Sindhu of our rheumatology clinic and all of us in the immune deficiency clinic are interested to see whether we have children like this. And if you do see any, please do send them over. There has been a 30-fold increase in Kawasaki-like disease, but remember that it's still rare, affecting only 1 in 1,000 children. So in general, COVID has not been very severe in children. We have been fortunate as care providers for children. The degree of severe disease that we have seen in adults, especially older adults, has not been seen in children. But there are some children who have severe disease, and this is a very interesting new development which has just happened over the last 2 weeks. So are there any susceptibility genes for these affected children? Another study which came in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology asking, is there a possible role for B cells in COVID-19? Lessons from patients with A-gamma globulinemia. So they had a few children with XLA and some others with common variable immune deficiency. And what they found was that children with XLA had surprisingly milder disease. They did not require ventilatory support. They did not require IL-6 blockade with tocilizumab, unlike those with CVID who had severe disease. But it was a small cohort and further studies are required. So the question being asked is, does a lack of B cells in children with XLA possibly prevent the cytokine storm, which is responsible for severe COVID-19? So a lot of work needs to be done on this. We are actually interested to looking at the effect of COVID-19 on children with primary immune deficiency disorders. Of course, we really hope that in Kerala, we would be spared doing this as well. So what are the challenges? There have been so many challenges that we have been beset with. Difficulty in making an early diagnosis, several investigations not being easily accessible, lack of time to arrive at a diagnosis. You have a child coming to a PICU, crashing within hours, and no time to do the relevant investigations. Relative lack of experience. We are on a learning curve. Lack of trained genetic counselors, which is still a problem. The high mortality rates. And on the right side, you can see Dr. Vinod Skaria talking to our families with X-linked A-gamma globulinemia at IMHANS. Actually, IMHANS has helped us a lot, and the sequencer that they had was the one that our JRF was using to do the Sanger sequence. These are the in-house diagnostics that we now have. We are able to do nephelometry. It's a gold standard for measuring the immunoglobulins. We're doing the nitroblue tetrazolium test, flow cytometry in the multidisciplinary research unit. So we have Dr. Dhanasuraj and others in the MRU who are really helping us, Shammi, Dhanasuraj and others. Lymphocyte subsets we are able to do by flow cytometry, DHR, and looking for the naive T cells. FISH again is being done in the MRU, karyotyping as well. Sanger sequencing, we have 2 Sanger sequencers now, one in the MRU and one in IMHANS. And we have the primers to look for the hotspot mutations, which have been very kindly provided to us by IGIB. So we can look for XLA, hyper-IgD syndrome and hyper-IgM syndrome right here in Calicut. And these are the instruments you see on the right side. Our 10-color flow cytometer, our Sanger sequencer, and the nephelometer. So it has really been a dream come true having all these investigations available to us. What are the booby traps to avoid? Never ever go by a single lab report. There's a very high probability of being misled. So whatever reports the child's family, the child's parents give you, look at them all. Look at trends over time. Do not calculate, if we do not calculate the absolute counts of neutrophils, just look at the percentages of neutrophils and lymphocytes, will be misled. Assessing lymphocyte subsets only based on proportions is not a good idea. We need to have the absolute numbers. Not spending time on a pedigree chart. There is this story which I like to tell. Actually, we called the father of one of our children and said that, please do bring the child tomorrow. We would like to do take a sample for exome sequencing, and you and your wife must also come. And please come to us at such and such a time. So the father said, should I come? So I said, why, you have to come. Father and mother should come. But then it turned out that the mother had remarried and he was not actually the biological father of the child. So if you do not spend time on a pedigree chart, you will be tied up in knots. Taking an old diagnosis for granted is a really bad idea. Never ever do it. Always investigate children afresh. The worst thing to do is waiting for tomorrow. Tomorrow may never come. So the child sometime during the night, or the parents might have had enough of our care and want to go somewhere else. So never ever postpone testing for inborn errors of immunity for the next day. Always do it immediately. What is the way forward? Well, suspecting PIDDs upfront rather than when the child is in extremis in the ICU. When you have no time, improving lab support, offering timely genetic counseling, having a flair for the unusual, not expecting these diseases only to be there in textbooks. They are there everywhere. All we need to do is factor them into our list of differential diagnoses. But some people often say that our junior residents would think of an inborn error of immunity upfront. Well, I wouldn't say that should not be done. Think of common thing first. But if you do not find common diagnosis, you find something unusual, factor in the unusual. Priority for social support is what is the need of the hour. I remember a child with hyper IgE syndrome. We had diagnosed and the child passed away. And a couple of months later, the mother gives us a distress call saying that, please go to the medicine ward. My husband is admitted there. He had just consumed an insecticide. So it was an attempted suicide. So we were able to help this family and the father actually survived. So it's so important to give support to the family, social, emotional support, and everything cannot be done by a pediatrician. So these are two books that we had brought out when we had CME last August, which was jointly organized by IGIB and Department of Pediatrics and Government Medical College, Kozhikode. The spotlight on primary immunodeficiency disorders. If anybody would like to have this book, which has a lot on investigating these various disorders, we can send it to them by email. And this is a patient handbook, patient information handbook. Again, it is available and can be sent. So thank you so much for taking time to listen to me. I would like to thank a few people. First, let me thank Professor C.K. Shashidharan and all my teachers and senior pediatricians, all faculty members from the Department of Pediatrics and our sister departments, all our students, friends from far and near who have joined. I'm indeed indebted to IAP Kozhikode for this opportunity. The President, Dr. Ashraf, Secretary, Dr. Nihaz, Webmaster, Dr. Ranjit, for this opportunity. And the work that has been done is not my own work, it has been a team effort. I would like to place in record my sincere gratitude to our collaborators, CSIR IGIB, Dr. Vinod Skaria, Dr. Sridhar Shivasubbu, Abhinav Jain, the Multidisciplinary Research Unit, Professor KP Aravindan, Dr. Dhanasuraj, Shami, and other scientists, our Junior Research Fellow, Atulya, the Department of Pediatrics, all our faculty and head of the department, Dr. Ajit, who have been supported throughout the way, the sister departments of pathology, microbiology and anatomy, Dr. Karthik from CCMB Hyderabad, Dr. Manisha from NIH Mumbai, Dr. Kumar and his team from IMHANS, and we acknowledge funding from Science and Engineering Research Board and FPID. And we'd like to thank all the children who we have been fortunate to see and all the families we were lucky to have interacted with. So bringing rainbows to the lives of these affected families is something we can only aspire to. Thank you, one and all.
Geeta, can
Yeah.
can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yes, yes, Ashraf. Very nice to you.
That was a great talk, even though I missed the early part of the talk because the Zoom didn't permit me to enter. As the was already right. Then I joined another Southern Nature meeting in my laptop.
Okay.
And while attending that meeting, I was continuously trying in my mobile to join this meeting. Finally succeeded.
Thank
Then
you so much.
I learned how to manage 2 meetings at a time. It was a great talk. I thank Dr. Geeta as well as Shasana. Second CKS വീട്ടിലേക്ക് സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്നു നടന്നില്ല പറ്റിയില്ല എനിക്ക് അവസരം വിഹാസിക്കുന്നു. Now the topic is open for discussion. I think Sabita has joined from the USA. In the participants list, I saw a name called Sabita. It should be our Sabita, I think.
Yes, sir. I am here.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks,
ma'am.
Sabita.
Thank you, Sabita.
Sabita, over to you. Your comments,
sir,
how
yes,
are you
sir.
there?
I am fine, sir. Thank you for inviting me. It was a wonderful opportunity to view, and I feel I was in mom's class only. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Let us offer it again.
Over to CKSR. CKSR ന്റെ ചെയറിന്റെ അവസരത്തിൽ ഞാൻ കേടിയങ്ങോട്ട് വന്നതാണ്. Over to CKSR. CKSR.
Hello.
Sir, കേൾക്കുന്നുണ്ട്.
Hello.
Yes, sir. സംസാരിച്ചോ? ഇപ്പൊ unmute ആണ്.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have proved nothing is
Sir, unmute ചെയ്യണം sir. Sir, mute ആയി പോയി വീണ്ടും. ഇപ്പൊ okay.
I think you have proved nothing is impossible. Go ahead, very wonderful. Keep going, and all support from all corners, and the effort, the tenacity, the perseverance you have shown is super. Please continue.
Team efforts.
Then whether or സാറിന്റെ കഴിഞ്ഞ സർ എന്തെങ്കിലും പറയാനുണ്ടോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അടുത്ത ആളെടുത്ത് പോവാം.
Thank you, Nihas, who called me in the morning. Then Ashraf.
Thank you, sir, for joining us.
I saw so many, Vijay Kumar I saw, and Ajit, everyone, Shaji from VMH, and Madhusudanan from Wayanad. Very nice get together through this video. Thank you very much.
Nihas, whether our state president Dr. Narayanan is there?
Sir, കണ്ടില്ല sir. Purushottam sir is there.
Purushottam sir.
Yes, Purushottam. I missed.
Purushottam sir, any comments? Geeta also highlighted the investigation and infrastructure facilities available in our department, in our medical college. Now, I think most of these tests are doing free of cost. Isn't Geeta?
Yes, sir. Yes, Ashraf. They're all free of cost. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah. Then Riyaz sir. റിയാസ് സാറിനെ കണ്ടിരുന്നല്ലോ ലിസ്റ്റില്. റിയാസ് സാർ
യെസ് സർ, അൺമ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്.
actually in 1998 there are 4 cases of Chediak Higashi syndrome from a family. നമ്മളൊരു primary immunodeficiency during PG days, the first case I saw was that family of 4 Chediak Higashi cases referred by Jose Anthony from Manjeri to Riyaz sir. Later Geeta started HIV clinic first. As the days goes on, the number of HIV patients become less. Then she shifted her interest to the primary immunodeficiency. Now she became one of the authorities in India in that area. Over to Riyaz sir.
കേൾക്കാവോ അഷ്റഫ്?
കേൾക്കാം.
കേൾക്കാം സർ, കേൾക്കാം.
ഹലോ MGG, ഹലോ സബിത.
ഞാൻ സാറിന്റെ പണ്ടത്തെ 4 ചെടിയാക്കി ഹിഗാഷിയെ പറ്റിയാണ് ഇപ്പൊ പറഞ്ഞത്.
ഞാൻ കേട്ടു.
Case referred by Jose Anthony during our PG days.
That was published in IJPP, and you had
I was also a co-author.
Yeah, you're president in Covalent Conference and got the prize also. That also I remember. So Dr. MGG, I used to call her MGG. It's a faculty with the sharpest brain in the Department of Pediatrics of IMC. Sharpest brain, Anna. And I was extremely fortunate to have Geeta with me for a very long time in my unit, along with other stalwarts like Vijay Kumar, Ajit Kumar, TP Ashraf, Krishnan C, and TVR. TVR is around? TV Rajesh? And finally, I appointed TV Rajesh as the additional HOD of Pediatrics also.
CK സാറിന്റെ കാലത്ത് ഞാനായിരുന്നു സാർ അത്.
Yes.
And MGG is the only person who speaks Queen's English. The only person who speaks Queen's English. The department.
Thank you so much, sir, for all your support. Actually, you were instrumental on setting me on this path.
And whenever I have doubt in English grammar, even I immediately call Geeta. And Geeta is only very happy to oblige me. And I know that she is now doing a wonderful job in the field of primary immunodeficiency. What has happened to the patient Mehboob? You remember the patient Mehboob? Mannarkad hepatitis.
That child had Biscott-Aldrich syndrome. Biscott-Aldrich syndrome.
Yeah, that's Biscott.
That child had a hematopoietic stem cell transplant and very well now.
Is well now. Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you. Thank you for a wonderful talk.
Vijay Kumar. Yes, please unmute Vijay Kumar.
സർ ഇല്ല.
Ajit or anybody else who wants to.
പുരുഷോത്തം സാർ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു സാർ. പുരുഷോത്തം സാർ.
Okay.
At the end of this video, I'll feel more and more ignorant. Today's talk, the caption itself, I was not aware of this new name, inborner of immunity. So a lot of information. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Vijay Kumar, Ajit. Anybody else who want to speak? Any questions to Geeta?